What if I told you that some of the most terrifying, mysterious, and unbelievable creatures from myths and legends weren't myths at all? For centuries, humans have told stories of dragons, sea monsters, giants, and strange beasts lurking in the unknown. These tales were often dismissed as exaggerations, imagination, or pure fiction. But as science has advanced, fossils have been uncovered, and history has been re-examined, we've discovered something incredible. Some of these so-called mythical creatures were actually inspired by real animals that once roamed the earth. Today, we're diving into 7 mythical creatures that really existed, and the truth behind them might be even more fascinating than the legends themselves. Let's begin. Number 1. Dragons, the legend of fire and scales. Dragons are perhaps the most iconic mythical creatures in human history. From ancient China to medieval Europe, nearly every culture has its own version of a dragon, massive reptilian beasts with wings, sharp claws, and sometimes the ability to breathe fire. But here's where it gets interesting. Many scientists believe dragon myths may have been inspired by real prehistoric creatures, dinosaurs. Long before humans understood fossils, ancient people often stumbled upon massive bones buried in the ground. Imagine discovering a giant skull or enormous ribcage without any scientific explanation. What would you think? A dragon. In fact, in ancient China, people referred to dinosaur fossils as dragon bones and even used them in traditional medicine. There's also another possibility: large reptiles like Komodo dragons. These massive lizards can grow over 10 feet long, with enormous tentacles lined with suction cups. They have huge eyes, the largest in the animal kingdom, perfectly adapted for the dark depths.
Number 2. Giant squids.
For most of human history, no one had ever seen a live giant squid. They were mysterious, elusive, and almost mythical themselves. It wasn't until the 21st century that scientists finally captured footage of one alive in its natural habitat. So yes, the kraken may not have been dragging ships to the bottom of the ocean, but the creature behind the legend is just as real and just as terrifying.
Number 3. Cyclops.
In Greek mythology, the Cyclops were giant, one-eyed beings known for their immense strength and terrifying appearance. At first glance, this sounds completely fictional, but there's a fascinating scientific explanation behind it. Ancient Greeks may have discovered the skulls of dwarf elephants, an extinct species that once lived on Mediterranean islands. Here's the key detail. Elephant skulls have a large central cavity where the trunk attaches. To someone unfamiliar with elephants, this hole could easily be mistaken for a single giant eye socket. Now imagine finding a massive skull like that with no context. A giant one-eyed creature doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore. This is a perfect example of how ancient people tried to make sense of the unknown using the knowledge they had, and in doing so, created legends that lasted thousands of years. Number 4. Mermaids, half human, half fish. Mermaids have been part of folklore across cultures for centuries, beautiful, mysterious beings living beneath the sea. But surprisingly, these legends may have a very real origin. Sailors who spent months at sea, often isolated and exhausted, would sometimes report seeing human-like creatures in the water. What they were actually seeing were likely manatees or dugongs, marine mammals that can resemble a human form from a distance. They have rounded bodies, flipper-like arms, and can even appear to wave when they surface. In fact, Christopher Columbus himself once reported seeing mermaids, though he noted they were not as beautiful as described. That's probably because they weren't mermaids, but misunderstood sea creatures. This shows how easily perception, environment, and expectation can shape what we believe we see. Number 5. The Griffin, guardian of treasure. The griffin is a legendary creature with the body of a lion and the head of an eagle. It was often depicted as a powerful guardian of treasure. But where did this strange hybrid come from? Some historians believe the griffin myth was inspired by fossils discovered in Central Asia. specifically fossils of the dinosaur called Protoceratops. These dinosaurs had beaked faces, 4 legs, and large bodies, features that could resemble a mix between a bird and a mammal. Nomadic tribes traveling along ancient trade routes may have discovered these fossils and interpreted them as remains of a griffin-like creature. Over time, these stories spread and evolved, eventually becoming part of mythology. Once again, we see how real discoveries, misunderstood through the lens of ancient knowledge, gave rise to legendary creatures. Number 6. Giants, humans of massive size. Stories of giants exist in nearly every culture, from Norse mythology to biblical texts. But could giants really have existed? While not in the exaggerated form described in myths, there is a real condition known as giantism. Giantism is caused by overproduction of growth hormone, leading to extreme height and size. One of the most famous examples is Robert Wadlow, the tallest human in recorded history, who stood at 8 feet 11 inches. Now imagine encountering someone like that in ancient times, when average human height was much shorter. They would seem almost superhuman. Additionally, ancient people sometimes discovered large bones, possibly from extinct animals, and assumed they belonged to giant humans. So while true mythical giants may not have existed, the idea was definitely rooted in real human conditions and discoveries. Number 7. The saber-toothed beasts, monsters of the Ice Age. Many ancient myths describe terrifying beasts with enormous teeth, creatures that hunted humans and dominated the land. These stories may have been inspired by real predators like the saber-toothed cat. These animals had long, curved canine teeth that could grow up to 7 inches long. They were powerful hunters and lived during the Ice Age, overlapping with early humans. It's entirely possible that early humans encountered these creatures, or at least heard stories passed down through generations. Even after they went extinct, their fossils could still continue to fuel myths about monstrous predators. In this case, the myth wasn't an exaggeration. It was a memory of a real and dangerous animal. In conclusion, so what does all of this tell us? It tells us that myths aren't always just stories. They're clues. Clues about how ancient people understood the world, clues about creatures that once existed, and clues about the human imagination, how we interpret what we don't fully understand. Dragons, mermaids, giants, and sea monsters may not exist in the way legends describe, but the truth behind them is just as fascinating, and in many cases, even more real than we ever imagined. The next time you hear a myth or legend, don't dismiss it too quickly, because hidden inside that story, there might just be a piece of history waiting to be uncovered. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more content like this.